Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
How's it going today?
Good. How are you? You're the astronomic koala, I understand.
Yep, that is very true. And I see you are intrepid broccoli.
That's right.
That's pretty funny because I'm eating broccoli like right now. So I
Oh,
like
that's
broccoli.
so
Well, I'm
offensive. How
like
dare
you.
you? How dare you eat my brethren?
Well, I probably don't taste good. I'm a koala, so we won't have the same problem. All
Yeah, I
right.
tend not to eat koalas. Yeah.
Yeah, you're vegetarian, eh?
I'm vegetarian when it comes to koalas.
Yeah, we probably don't taste good. Probably a little bit tough. So. All right, cool, man. So before we jump in, just want to kind of quickly touch base on like where you're at in your interviewing process, and like if you're looking for anything in particular for this one.
Yeah, thank you. I've just been referred by a current Google employee who's a former colleague of mine, and I'm looking at jobs in data science and machine learning engineering. And I have not yet applied for the jobs with the referral, so, because I want to, kind of pick my moment, like when I've done plenty of practice and stuff. But I know that there's like a 30-day time limit. That's all.
Okay, that is very interesting actually because yeah, I have a background in machine learning. So this
Great.
in particular though is this one is dedicated to coding and data structures. Is that what you were expecting?
Yes, it is. In fact, I've taken one machine learning interview from interviewing.io. That was good. One thing that I noticed that is missing is the data science focus on these interviews. And so that's an area where I feel like I've had less practice than I wish I had in terms of interviewing. I don't know whether it's working with pandas or whatever it would be, but yeah. So anyway, that's like kind of what I feel like I'm missing the most. But because I just recently got this opportunity at Google, I'm going to do this ALGS and data structure interview with the Google interviewer, and then similarly, I'm going to do a machine learning engineer specifically at Google.
So are those two separate like interview tracks where you can do both at the same time?
Are you talking about interviewing.io or at Google?
Oh no, I mean at Google. From your last comment, it sounded like there was like you're interviewing for two different roles at the same time, or did I
Oh,
misunderstand?
I'm sorry. I wasn't clear. So what I mean to say is that on interviewing.io, so I understand that whether I end up getting an interview at the actual Google company from for a machine learning engineer job or a data scientist job, probably the preliminary interview will be something more like a leak code thing. I think like probably, this ALGS and data structure stuff. And believe it or not, sometimes I'm weaker on those type of interviews than I am on the actual, theory of machine learning and stuff. So I need to practice this as well. But what I was saying earlier is that I'm simultaneously doing practice interviews on interviewing.io from on ALGS and data structures at Google. And also I've purchased a specifically machine learning interview from Google on interviewing.io, if that makes sense.
Got it. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So yeah, okay, I got a wicked question for you today. It's from a real Google onsite, so this is totally the difficulty you can expect. I will, give you a caveat here and say that this is for the SDE track. I'm not quite sure if they do like differ significantly in terms of like difficulty, but I would probably guess that it's the same quality. So this is probably going to be pretty representative for you.
Great. Did you say SD like system design?
No, sorry, like software engineer.
SD. Okay.
Yeah, like the raw track with no machine learning or whatever.
Great.
Okay, wicked. We can possibly branch into a second question, but it's definitely not expected. In a real interview, you just be expected to solve this one. But if you're like a superstar, we can absolutely, move you forward.
Great.
Awesome. Okay. Let's define a couple files here. Okay. So say this is a web app, and we have our entry point as well. So what I want you to do is write me a program that takes in these files and outputs the directory structure, including the files as well, in a specific format. This is a fun one. Yeah, like this would be a possible solution. There's also other solutions as well. So here's another one. So it'll be like this. And yeah, there we go.
Great. Okay, so and I was planning on writing this, doing this assignment in Python, if that works. It seems like in principle this could be sort of like a bash question, but did you have anything in mind?
No, Python's excellent for this. I would say another good one is Java if you feel comfortable, but Python totally works for me.
Okay, good. Yeah, I actually don't. I'm not so good at Java, so maybe Python is better. Let's see here.
Cool. Sounds good.
So first of all, let me just put in here a couple of functions that I'm going to need, and it might. I'm just going to put a function isDir, and it'll take in a string which represents the file name, and it'll tell me if the function is a directory as opposed to a file. So it should return a Boolean, and there probably is a built-in function that does that. So I'm kind of showing my ignorance here by not knowing it, but I'm just going to assume that function exists. And alternately, I could write is file, or is is not directory.
Okay.
I'm going to need to know that. Let's see. And I'm looking at the format you gave me. Okay. So index, asset, HTML. Interesting. Okay. So what is my input to this function? Is it the root directory as a string?
No, so your input to this function would be a list of files, because essentially we want to parse that file system structure and then print it out.
Oh, okay, good. That's a whole different problem. Okay, good. I'm glad I asked. Okay, so let's see here. And for instance, if I notice that the 4 files you've given me share a common directory, but that needn't be the case, I'm assuming. So there may be more than one, I guess. If you call the root directory just /, but there could be more than one directory on the level directly beneath the root directory. Is that correct?
Okay, so that's a good call out. It will actually make your life more difficult if it is, without giving too much away. So let's assume everything is under /web app.
Oh, can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, like let's assume that everything is under the first, like in this case, it would be web app, but the first root directory would always be the same.
Okay, everything is under, there's only one file in the root directory, let's say, that we care about. In this case, web app is that file, and we can assume that there's no others.
Yeah, like web app would be the directory though, right? I know you said file, web app would be the directory.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe I'm using incorrect terminology. When I say file, I mean to say whatever the word is that could be either a file or a directory. I don't know exactly what word to use for that.
I see. Okay. Just to be specific though, let's assume that it's always a directory. Like there's always a top level directory, and it's always just a directory. Yeah.
That's a good assumption to keep in mind. Okay, so there exists a top level directory and only one. So there exists a unique top level directory. Okay.
And I guess like just one very quick hint, because I don't want to throw you off here. Don't like fix on that top level directory. It doesn't change much. Like for you solutioning out, it's not productive to focus too much on that. It's just if it wasn't there, your solution might be a lot more complicated.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So this is kind of silly, but I know that I'm going to need a file to, okay, so my input is a list of strings, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay. Oh, my keyboard's going a little janky here. Okay. So that'll be my main function. And it's just going to print, right? It has no return value. Is that correct?
Hey, I'm sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you don't have to return anything, just print it.
Okay, good. So I'll make myself a little function here that says remove initial character. I don't know if I'll end up using that or not, but it should be a string input. Okay, and I'll put pass there. Okay, so print files is going to do that. Okay, let's see. Okay, well, because of the format that you've given me, conveniently, I can start printing right away. So in other words, like there's no need for me to delay any printing. Once I see the first line of the input, well, actually, you wrote, yeah, it doesn't. So apparently, from your examples, it doesn't matter in which order I put the subdirectories, right? Like assets versus well, index is not a directory, but like HTML could come before JS or the other way around, for instance, or do they need to be in a certain order?
No, they don't have to be in any order. It's just arbitrary directories. Yeah.
Okay. So this is kind of nice. So I can actually just start printing right away, and I probably don't have to remember that much. I have to remember like the current directory that I'm in. So maybe let's see here. It might be something like finding a common root with a given file or something. Let's see here. So once I get that, I know I need to go down there. So yeah. So essentially what's going on here is I'm every line that I come across, I need to print a directory, I need to print a list of things that end up being a file. So if I look at the first thing that says web app.js, CJS, can you see that highlighting that I've done there?
Yep, I can.
Okay. So that I should do that as one thing. So really, I should think of it as I'm printing the first 3 lines of the print of output represent one thing, which is the c.js file. And the printing format comes from a list, each of which is like the path to that file. So think of the path to c.js, for instance, like a list of strings, which are dir names. Okay, and plus, lastly, a file name. So what I want to do is I want to make a function that says that print path, and it's going to take in a list of, so I'll call it path, which is going to be a list of strings, and it's going to output none. And what it's going to do is I'm going to give it a list of strings. Hopefully this is becoming clear what I'm going for here. So print path of web app, so this will be strings, web app, comma, assets, comma, let's say JS, because we were taking the other example, JS, comma, c.js will print these first 3 lines. So all that print path needs to do is sort of, I think docstrings needs 3 quotes like that. So I want to say just print the list, print each string on its own line, each indented, with dashes, I guess, each printed with an extra indentation. So now what I need to do is, when I get a new file, is okay. So also I need to. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so in the example that you gave, web apps plus, like all of the files that are in ABHTML subdirectory are together. But I'm guessing that I cannot assume that that would be the case in general. Is that right?
Yeah, that'd be right.
Okay. So it might be worth doing a sort of a sort on the initial file so that I can assume that. Now, the thing that I would want to think about is there any way that could bite me? Like if I do, supposing I sort the input and I just say, here is like files equals list sorted files. Is that going to come back to bite me somehow in that, first of all, what's the problem here? It says undefined name list. Oh, okay, so I need to import list from typing. So is there any reason that should not guarantee me that all of the files that are in a common subdirectory will be together? So I don't know. It seems like that would work. Do you have any objection to that solution? To that, that step in the solution to sorting it like that? Are you there?
Oops, sorry, I was muted again. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. I see what you're doing here. Okay, I've never seen this solution, so I think what you're kind of doing is like, I'm just trying to understand.
can I try to explain it one more time?
Sure. The only one thing I would say, and this is something that trips people up commonly when they just think of like a simple solution, is just keep in mind that you're not duplicating the parent directories for each one. Like for a.html and b.html, they're both just under HTML, and that's not printed twice, right?
Oh yeah. So yes, I agree. So my plan was that in order to determine what needs to be printed for each line, for each entry in the files list. So far, so good. So I'm trying to go from entry in the files list to what needs to be printed. So first, I'm going to take a sort of, greatest common directory with the previous item in the list. And then that will help me determine, or least common directory, or however we want to say it. That will help me determine what to print. So if I'm looking at web app/assets/b.html, I can say, okay, well, last thing that I did was print a.html, so I don't need to reprint these things here. And therefore, what I'm going to send to the print path function is a singleton list that is just b.html because of that information. Now, if A and B did not appear, if between a.html and b.html there was another file that lived in the JS directory, for instance, that would kind of break my approach because they wouldn't be gathered together and I wouldn't be able to look at the previous entry to determine what I needed to print. And that's the function of calling sorted there. Does that help you understand better what I'm going for?
Yeah, it definitely helps me understand more. I'm just curious kind of how you're going to implement it. I will give you one hint just to kind of simplify your solution, because it's still possible that this will work, but I think perhaps a simpler way would be kind of to just parse this into some sort of data structure, and then that data structure will kind of like inherently remove any duplication. And, just one quick traversal of that will give you the correct answer you're thinking.
Oh, okay. That'll work. Okay, then.
Yeah. Okay. It's up to you, though. If you feel confident in this one and you want to do it, it could still be okay as well. So I'll leave it up to you.
Well, it just so naturally forms a tree, doesn't it? So it just makes sense to put things in a tree of some kind. So maybe we'll do it that way. Okay. So you recommend making a little class, so node, and then we'll say that each node has a string, and so we'll say def init self s string self dot name equals, well, I don't know, name is probably a reserved term, isn't it? So I'll say self dot node name equals s. And I also need it needs to have some children. So I will say def add child, and that will be self and s string, and then I will say self dot children. Let's say this. How about this? So if self dot children dot append node s.
Okay.
And then I will say else self dot children equals a list containing node of s. Okay, so that seems to make sense. This is just an n-ary tree. There's no limit on the number of children a given guy can have. Okay. I may have forgotten something, but if so, I'll go back and make it. And then I probably won't need this print path function. So let me just, comment that out. We'll just move everything to the bottom. Okay, so now let's just go into main function. So def print files of files, which is a list of strings, and it returns none. And then we'll say, so the first thing we want to do is, I mean, really our print files function should do only two things, one of which is tree is equal to build tree from files. Okay, and then it should do the last thing, which is print tree of tree. I mean, that's really what essentially is going on. And
yep.
Why is it undefined? Oh, well, yeah, I haven't defined it yet, so of course. Oh gosh, this happens to me. I keep locking myself out of my computer accidentally. Okay, so now let's make build tree. So let's say def build tree from nodes, well, from files, which is a list of strings, and it outputs a node, which is the head, and we'll do that in a second, and we'll just say another function is called def print tree, which takes in a node, which is the root of the tree, and root, which is a node, and outputs none. Okay, and that we'll figure out what that means in a second. Oh gosh, I keep blocking myself out of my computer. Okay, so what should we do first? Let's see, there's build tree and there's print tree. How much time do we have? We are on 29 minutes here, so maybe not going quite as fast as I would like, but we'll get it done. Okay, so build tree from files. What I want to do is I want to say something like split it on the slashes. So you know, I can extract this into its own function. If I were a Python Jedi, I should know exactly how to do it. So let's say
oh, it's cool. You can make something up. No worries, man.
Okay. Parse file name into list, and it's going to take in a string, path, which is a string, and it's going to output a list of string. Okay, so we'll also do that in a second. But so build tree is going to say for path in files. First, it's going to say list path as list equals parse file name into list of path. And then what don't you like about that? Local variable is assigned to but never used. Okay, whatever. So now I'm going to go through the list and add the node to the tree if it's not already there. So I should probably have a little auxiliary function that says add to tree, add node to tree, and this is going to be so root node, and it's going to do nothing because it's going to modify it in place. And okay, so then I'm going to say path as list is equal to parse is equal to that. For I don't know, item in path as list. Well, actually, you know what? I should just pass the entire list into add node to tree because I don't need to go through everything again and again. So why don't I just make it list node, list of node,
okay.
And then, but it's not going to necessarily be a root. It's going to be like a path. So for item in path is list. Now I don't need to do this. I should just say for path in files, path is list is this, and I'll say add node to tree, which is path as list. And that should really take care of it once I implement that function. And then down here, it'll return, so let's say, first of all, yeah, I mean, this will actually do everything. I just need to make sure I have the root node available. So maybe, I don't know, parse file name into list, or rather add node to tree could take in a root as well. So let's say root, path is list. It's hard to say exactly what we want here. So obviously I need to tell what tree I'm going to add it to at some point. So root node, and I'm going to need to create the root in build tree somewhere. So that needs to happen. So let's say root equals a node, just blank string at first, and then in add node to tree, I might need to populate the root. So I'll need to make sure to check if the root is empty, just for if the root dot node name is empty. Okay, so let's get back to business. For path and files, add node to tree, do that stuff. That seems like all we need in principle for that function. And now let's go down to print tree. So that we just need to do basically I want to say I'm just making sure I'm saying it correctly. So pre-order versus post-order and in order. It looks like we only want to print the leads, obviously, but actually what we really want to do is an in-order traversal. So basically this is just going to be traverse in order. Actually, I just need to make sure I'm saying the right terminology here. So we want, in this case, we want every item first and then its children. But actually we want to first print the item and then go eagerly to the first child and print that, and then go down and print that. So that's interesting. I'm just trying to remember exactly what that order of traversal is called. Traverse, I should remember that in a second. So traverse in.
Yeah, no worries, man. I don't know where you're going with that. It's pre-order traversal.
Oh, tree order. Okay. My computer
Yeah.
Okay. So root children. Excuse me. Oh my God. Tree order traversal. Printing formatted names. Okay. So how's that going to go? It's going to say current node equals so let's see, what we want to say is if not node, if not root, just return. So if I pass it none, I want to return. And but I probably won't be passing it none, I'm guessing, as it turns out. So I'll say oh, this is interesting because I kind of need to remember how many spaces I'm indented, don't I? Because if I so let's say print tree root node. So I'll make a print tree helper. Which takes in well, actually, I'm not sure I need that, do I? So, well, the problem is if I say a new line, it just takes me right to the beginning of the next line. So I do kind of need to know the current indent, don't I? So if not root, return. We know that. We'll put pass in here to make it happy for a second. And we'll say print tree helper of root, and the first one has indent 0. Okay, that's good, and it'll know to print the dashes and stuff. And so then up on print tree helper, we'll say, oh, do you care if there's a new line at the end of everything or not? Like at the end or not at the end or at the beginning, does that matter to you?
You know what? I'm not super worried about it. So yeah,
okay.
It's totally cool.
Okay. So print tree helper is going to say, first it's going to say, first, print a string, which I've just built, so spaces. So let's say spaces equals 1 space times indent. And then I'll print spaces. So, or like if spaces. Let's say spaces equal to nothing, and if indent spaces plus equals that. And then I'll print spaces. And then I will say, and I mean, probably this should be extracted into its own little function, but we could do that if we wanted to. All right. Now, print dash dash. Now, print the root dot node name, which is a string. And there should be one, so we shouldn't expect to run into the error where the root has no name, unless you give me an empty list, but I should probably check for that in the main file, so in the main function rather. So if not, files, just return, print nothing. Okay, and then here we're on print tree helper, print the node name, and then also print a new line.
Okay.
And then for child in root dot children, we're going to print tree helper of child, comma, indent plus 2, right? Because we want to advance 2 spaces on each line, as I understand it. So that makes sense, I think, as long as there's only one root. So we start with no spaces. If there's an indent, do that. Each stack frame has its own spaces variable. That's when I print the spaces, then I print the dashes, then I print the node name, and then for each child I print that, and then I come back and then I return. So I just forgot to write return. And space that out a little bit to make it a little more easy to read. And yeah, that makes sense. So shouldn't be calling it if there's no children. Okay. Yeah, so any tips real quick before I just kind of finish implementing it? I'm not going quite as fast as I wish I was, but that's part of my thing I'm working on here. So before I finish doing everything else, do you have any tips or any input?
No, I mean, I think it's going pretty well.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, I'll finish up. Okay, so I think my print files function's done. Build tree is this done yet? So for passing files, path is list is equal to parse file and thing, add node to tree. I think that is good. Yeah, so now I need to make sure I have this, have print tree helper, that's good. Build tree, I need to make sure I have path as list and add node to tree. Okay, so path as list is, I called it path parse file name into list. Okay, so this one is basically just like, this is something with Python string split, and I'll have to figure that out in a second. That's probably the least important part, but important to get right. And then here I want to say add node to tree. Okay, so this is interesting. Now I have a root node and I have a path to list node, so this is kind of fun. So let's see, how exactly do I want to do this? So if root dot node name, if not root dot node name, root dot node name is equal to path 0, because I shouldn't be passing it an empty path. I'm always getting some kind of a path. Okay, so that's just getting that out of the way. And now I want to say, so when I add a node to a tree, I want to check if, let's see. So for item in path, which is a list, maybe I'll remind myself that it's a list by writing it as path as list. For item in path as list, I'm going to say current node. So first I'll make the current node equal to the root. And then I'll say for item in path as list,
Okay.
Yeah, so I just need to make sure I'm doing this in a way that makes sense. So, so my current node starts out as the root, and the first item is going to be the root. So if, I don't know, if item is equal to current node, this is only going to obtain in the very first case, in the root case. So dot node name. Then I'll continue. Okay. Now, if item is in the current node dot children, then current node equals okay, this is interesting. So if it's in the children, I sort of need to get the index of it in order to reach it, don't I? So, you know, the children could be a set. I don't know. That's interesting. So I might make the children a set. It's not really ordered, and that's kind of posing some extra difficulty on the problem. So I guess I'm kind of getting lost in details here, but so
I'll just give you as well. We have like about 3 minutes left, so
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just giving me that heads up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So current node is equal to I don't know how I'm going to do this. So current node dot children of index of, so we'll say in here that index is equal to get index of item in current node dot children, and I forget how to do that in Python, which I should know. So we'll just say get index of X and L. So we'll do that in a second. Current node is that, and then I'll say continue. But actually, I need to, yeah, that's fine. But if it's not and if it's not in there, I want to say current node dot children dot append node of item. Actually, not in quotes, just straight up item. And then I'll say current node is equal to. Again, I'm having this get index thing, so this is kind of dumb, but yeah, I have to fix this, but I don't really have time to fix it right now. So this is good practice to not do dumb things in the future. So item current node dot children. Again, we're doing this dumb get index thing. So current node equals current node dot children index, and now I continue. Okay, so that seems to make sense. Let's see what else is going on here. Sure wish I had written it well enough so that I was sure it was going to run. Now, what's wrong with this path? Oh, path is list, yeah. Okay. Current equals root. What's going on here? Root. Oh, that's your cursor. I see. Okay. So,
they were like just out of time, unfortunately.
No problem. Yeah. Well,
yeah, for sure. I'm actually stopping you a bit early because like I have quite a bit of feedback, and it's not necessarily from it being bad. It's so let me just explain this. I've asked this question many times, and a lot of the solutions are let's just say this is probably the closest that I've ever seen to what I myself would write, which I find quite interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think me and you have a lot of the same coding styles. Like I personally love using like a lot of small utility functions and stuff like what you're using. But I was able to get quite a read on what like kind of feedback to provide you for improvement as well. So let me just kind of jump in here. Want to make sure we can get this in before the 10 minutes is up. Okay, so before we jump into the coding stuff, let me just give you a few like higher level things. I would say try to stay higher level before you jump in. I think that's one thing I would have liked to see from you. And I think that comes more from like a structured approach. So at the start, just, spend like 2-3 minutes asking clarifying questions, which you kind of did. I'm not going to lie, like I wasn't totally like not impressed with that, but try to stay a bit higher level in terms of like, hey, what kind of data structures and algorithms can I use to solve this? And like when you actually get, this candidate algorithm, don't feel like you need to jump into the code to prove that it's right. Just like, even if you want to pseudocode it, not everyone likes that, but at the end of the day, I just kind of need to see you like show that your algorithm works on an example before you kind of jump into the code, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of feel it out with the interviewer and say like, here's what I'm going to go for. I'm going to describe to you in a few sentences like my overall plan, and then hopefully it's in a few sentences, and then to see how they want you to go in terms of, do you just want some pseudocode? Do you want me to just start coding?
For sure. And I think like, a concrete example for this one is like, let's say it took you like 3 to 4 minutes to be like, okay, a tree data structure kind of works for this. Okay, a pre-order traversal kind of works for this. And then what I would do from there is parse the list of files like you would with your strategy. And then, have your tree, and then just do a quick pre-order traversal to make sure like the output is right. And then at that point, it's like, okay, I can jump in and just start bashing this thing out. Like when you're coding, you should be removing a lot of the ambiguity beforehand, so you're not like trying to figure things out on the fly. Is one tip.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, let me just look at my notes here. Okay, before we jump into the code. Okay, another thing is think about optimizations before you code. That's a really good tip too, because sometimes you'll waste your time coding and it won't be optimized. And it's like, it's okay to code the brute force solution. Like we're not gonna be like, oh, this guy's, coding the brute force solution. It's a total waste of time, but it's just removing time for you to get the optimal solution. So the way I would think about it is like, run through the time complexity, maybe even volunteer it to the interviewer. In this case, it was order n squared for the tree. I probably would have asked you that as well by the end, but kind of ran out of time. Anywho, like what I would say is just make sure that you're like trying to get some sort of optimization in if it's possible. And I think you were getting there because I think I heard you mention like set or something.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was looking for, right? So that would have brought it to order n. So
Yeah.
my suggestion to you is just kind of think through optimizations just very quickly before you code. Obviously, it's okay to tell me the brute force, but doesn't mean we always need to kind of code it. That's all.
Okay.
Cool. So, concrete example again, what I would say for this one is it would have been good for you to realize that this was a trie data structure instead of a tree, because tree is the naive implementation. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And if everyone realizes that it's a trie, like with saying it's a trie, they just kind of, they just go, okay, when I'm inserting and I have to insert, finding the parent at each level every time to, insert the node, hey, I can just use a map instead of a list, which I think is what you were getting at, or like a hash set or whatever. So yeah. It would have been great to just call that out beforehand. Always a good idea. Okay, and then, so jumping into the code, see like, okay, I'm just kind of working against the clock here. It's always difficult because I got to jump off like, but just give me one sec.
Sure.
Okay, so number of different things here, and they're not all bad. I actually thought your code was quite clean overall. I think you have a good coding style, maybe a little bit biased because it's like mine, but essentially what I'm saying is it's the best coding style in the world, But personally, I think your code is very clean. I would have given you positive data points on that. I think your use of utility functions is excellent. Now, I'm going to throw in a little caveat here, and this may be something that can help you. And it's kind of contradictory. So number one, feel free to use small utility functions without necessarily implementing them. So I'll give you an example.
Okay.
On line 85 to 91, you probably lost between, you lost maybe 2 to 3 minutes just trying to get that out. If that was me, I would have just done something like this, honest to God, print with tabs, dude, and then indent. And then I would have just left it till the end. And most interviewers don't care because it's such a simple function. It's like, we know where you're going with that, It's not a big deal.
With you.
Something like that, whatever you want to do. And then you wouldn't have had this line 85 or whatever. That would just save you time. But then I'm going to contradict myself here and say, be careful of using too many utility functions because it's easy to get trapped in like trying to figure out the signature and this and that. A good one is your add node to tree one. I think it would have been better for you to try and implement that just in the build tree function. And then by the end of it, if you wanted to refactor into a function, that would have been totally cool. But it's actually a bit easier to just do it in the build tree function, in my opinion.
Yeah, since it is the last item in the build tree function, it's not really that bad to just implement it there. I agree.
For sure. And it's interesting too, because it actually has a timing concern in the sense of how it's kind of difficult to explain this, but essentially you're modifying your pointer for the entire path, like as you go along in some of the model solutions. Like I'll send you a model solution in the one after this potentially, but you have this current pointer that just starts at root. I'm just on line 111. And you can easily just build the path of the tree by modifying current as you insert. And it makes it a little bit easier than doing it in a different function. So my advice is,
nice.
my advice is just do it in the central function and then refactor it after if you have time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's about being judicious in which things you factor out into a utility function right away. Then knowing what's like, core logic and what's just like some BS that you need to just, everybody knows what you mean.
For sure. I found myself, before I kind of internalized this advice, I found myself running out of time because I was trying to implement too many small utility functions. So definitely, I think there's a balance though, because a lot of your utility functions made total sense. Like I think you nailed it at the start when you're like, oh, we need to build the tree and we need to traverse it. Like that made total sense to me. I think that was awesome. But there's just kind of a balance, and I think you're a little bit too far into like making so many functions that it's going to kill your time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so one thing, that's something I should optimize. And as of right now, a lot of it is, well, I think it is, it's some kind of a coding style, but also it's like, it helps me think through it. If I'm like, okay, these are the two major steps, it's kind of like chunking it. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And keep in mind, it's also like better for us to see you kind of get the right solution and then refactor, like maybe not perfectly, you run out of time after you refactor and you're like, oh crap, I didn't get it perfect, rather than the reverse where you're like one or two functions away from getting it. I think that's a more ideal outcome. So my advice would be like lean towards refactoring afterwards as much as possible. But sometimes, it makes sense to do it first. Like the one you said, like, makes sense. Okay, and then what else did I have here? Quick comment about just like explaining the entire time. So I like to tell people that, you kind of get this advice where like they're like, oh, you have to just explain yourself the entire time, just talk, and more talking is better. I disagree with that. I think it's appropriate if you do get stuck to like, if your thinking style is better, like when you're just silent, it's totally fine to say to the interviewer, like, hey man, I'm going to take 5 minutes to just kind of think this through and then just be silent. That's totally fine. The caveat there I will say is that I get the sense that you kind of are like a thinker on the fly where you're almost like thinking while you're talking. So if that's the natural way for you to think, just keep doing what you're doing. But if you're just doing that, just to kind of show your thoughts, then perhaps just consider my other advice.
Yeah, that might be a good strategy to compress the time a little bit more. It's like if I allow myself, maybe not at the very, very beginning should I be silent, but like if I've been going for a little while and maybe just allow myself a little time to just work and then come back and be like, here's what I just did, blah, blah, blah. That could maybe save me some time because, I think I'm okay at talking while I'm working, but I work a lot faster if I don't have to talk while I'm doing it.
Definitely, man. And I think you're kind of nailing it when you're thinking like timing. That's something I've struggled with as well. Keep timing on like I'll say this, like keep timing high on your priority list for your practicing. Even if you go do leak code, try and don't do it in a relaxed fashion necessarily. Try and like think through it as if you're in a real interview and focus on getting your timing as best as possible. Because I think your timing's just a little bit off for Google still.
Yeah, I would agree.
Wicked. Okay, I think that's the majority.
So you're going to send me an implementation with a try so I can see how that looks?
Yeah, for sure. And you know what, man? It's actually very similar to your current solution. So it's like, basically it would be your solution maybe with a map instead of a list. And then...
Oh, okay, that's about it.
Yeah, and then just like a little bit maybe like simpler code at certain aspects. But yeah, it's basically like what you would have gotten to, I think, if you had more time.
Okay, great. Yeah, so awesome. I will prioritize timing. Thank you for that note.
Yeah, no worries, man. Yeah, this was a fun session, actually. I enjoyed this one. I have to take off. I think that's pretty much the entirety of my notes. Yeah, dude, I wish you the best in your real interviews. I think obviously you have a lot of promise. Just work on the timing and the other stuff that I said, and I think you're in good shape, man.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
Take care.